We'll give it a few minutes to see if people give them a chance to log in.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll start now. I wanted to welcome our filmmaker of Man in the Middle, Philip Rodriguez, to the audience. He made a documentary in 2014 that was released on PBS. It's received a lot of acclaim and won a film festival. Also, the documentary kind of unravels all the events that took place during and around the surrounding of the killing of Ruben Salazar. Philip, say hello to the audience. And
good morning.
I wanted to ask you, well, first of all, your film is on YouTube. Thank goodness it lives there. People can still tune in. So any of you who
And if they don't find it on YouTube, it's on Vimeo as well. So
Vimeo on YouTube, great. What inspired you to make this film?
It was one of those stories that, like so many Mexican-American stories, like so many Los Angeles stories, California stories, have been neglected by the people who broker national narrative, by the people that make decisions about books and films and television shows. And I felt like it deserved an airing. It deserved to be understood and witnessed and be part of the bloodstream of the American larger story. So really rescuing it from obscurity.
How long did it take you to make?
It took way too long. They always would take way too long. These are things. It takes money raising and convincing people, which is really the hardest part of things. Convincing people who largely, again, these East Coast brokers of culture have very little appreciation for, anything Mexican-American, have a certain kind of contempt for Los Angeles, and consider it a not serious place. And so there was two strikes against us going in here. And really, I was told time and time again that the story was not a national story, that it was a regional story, that it was an ethnic story. And I said, no. This is very much a national story. It's obviously, there's lots of reasons that the Mexican-American story is so marginalized in terms of the American and global narrative. But one of them is that we have a country that only sees things in black and white, where everybody, the imagination of most is locked somewhere between that antagonism, that death stare of black people and white people, and all the nuance and all the in-betweenness often gets unreported, neglected, misunderstood. So it's a great opportunity. People like me and people like come after be able to step in and try to present these stories with much more nuance and thoroughness and sensitivity.
Can I ask you, where did you get most of the funding to do this documentary?
Most of it came from Corporation Public Broadcasting, and then bits and pieces other places.
So it came out in 2014, but when did you actually say, I'm going to make this film? And
I don't know. I'm really bad with time, and if I was good thinking about calendars and time, I wouldn't want to do this because I really just somebody don't know. I know that it was a lot of time fundraising, and then once you get the money, then you go out and go, and that's the fun part. Excuse me. That's a real pleasure.
Well, I enjoyed the use of graphics that you had in the film, with showing the missile going into the bar, all that kind of animation graphics. Who edited this piece?
The film was edited by a guy named Michael Zapanta, a fellow I knew in film school. And the graphics were made by a guy named Claudio Rocha, a Chilango who now lives in Los Angeles. I met in Mexico City many years ago, and he's a marvelous talent. And I'll tell you about those graphics if you're interested. The graphics, we recreated the Silver Dollar Bar.
Right.
And we did so, well, it's a complicated endeavor. I mean, first of all, we had to find, there was no information. When you're going to tell a story of a marginalized group, there was very little in the way of data. There were literally a handful of photographs of it went, and most of them weren't very good. Mm-hmm. There were a clip from interviews that he did with Bob Navarro, and there was no tape, no archive had that tape. Literally someone very kind, and I don't remember who it was, it may have been Felix Gutierrez from the USC, who had figured out that someone had a beta copy that it actually photographs the interview off the television. So we went with that. So we've had so few materials once again, so it becomes a kind of an Easter egg hunt to reassemble history of marginalized groups. You've got to make you have to necessarily be an investigator. And the key component to the film, the thing that made the film really go, was that, and one of the reasons that the story had been so stymied, is that we had to pursue legal action against Los Angeles County Sheriff Department that had been involved, of course, in his demise. And with the help of MALDEF, Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, the great help of the great Tom Sines, chief counsel there, basically put the sheriff in a bad situation so that they had to release the files to us. And that was a game changer. All of a sudden we had images, we had sounds, we had information, we had all kinds of things from which we assembled at least the last part of the show, and certainly the death part of the show, right? And so we created the Silver Dollar Bar. Claudio did it. The producer found a blueprint of the bar, the original, when we met the former owner, wonderful man, and the owner at the time of Ruben's death, and found an architectural rendering of the bar, or the plans, and then matched the photographs, the large plate negatives that we got from the Sheriff's Department legal action, and then basically was able to create what it felt like, the dimensions and the projectiles, trajectory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, lots of work, lots of sleuthing, lots of
investigative,
lots of creative work, a lot of investigative journalistic work. Yeah.
Well, it looks great. It was well done. I'm curious about the man in the red shirt, who was talked a lot about. Why did he say he saw a man go in there with a gun?
I don't know, busybody, fool. I don't know. I just a broken guy.
Well, I have to ask you.
Wanted to please cops, cop pleaser,
So we hear from him in the film, but he's in a silhouette and his voice.
Yeah, he didn't want to be identified. He was afraid that he would, I don't think he felt good about his actions. His family didn't feel good about his actions. There was some regret. And again, how can I say this? A man who'd had a harder time in life and maybe felt, and I don't know, everybody's got a psychology and everybody's got a myriad of reasons for doing stupid shit or divine shit, depending on who you are. But I hope we don't spend all of our time here talking about death, because death is a mirror, is a small part, certainly sensational. And people have done that for years. We talked about Ruben's death, poor Ruben's death. He was killed, he was assassinated. And ultimately, what I knew going in was the really interesting thing about this story and this film and this man was the man, and was the cultural negotiation that he was in the midst of at the time of his death. That he was a middle class, middle-aged veteran of the Korean conflict, suburban fellow married to a güera in Orange County, who is on a rocket professionally at the LA Times. At the LA Times, at the peak of its prestige. There was a great era for the Times. It's now rebounding from a long period of inertia and underwhelming resources. So he, the story is really about change, right? About feeling the wind blowing and responding with your own, challenging your own identity and challenging your own assumptions that you were operating with earlier. And I think that's what's so exciting about the film. And certainly, again, the death's spectacular. I'm happy to, I don't want to shoot down questions about it. I'm happy to discuss it, but it gets ad nauseum. And it seems to be, to me, a regrettable, the focus on his death, on his demise, as as a tragic and stupid thing, sometimes tends to take focus away from his courage and his capability and his and the lesson that he has to offer us as a man as a courageous journalist.
Well, you interviewed one of his daughters in the film, and we've had a good relationship with her too when we created the Ruben Salazar Awards. When you first approached them about doing this documentary, what was their response? Salazar's wife and the children.
Oh, it's complicated. Everybody's very. Really, I don't want to speak to them. I don't want to tell secrets. But it was complicated, and their relationship to to Chicanos, they were not Chicanas. These were middle-class women who had a white mom and whose dad was knocked down early. So they didn't particularly affiliate, didn't speak Spanish. They didn't affiliate with, they didn't marry Latinos. They didn't feel part of the experience because they weren't. And it's not a pejorative. That's not a knock. That wasn't their culture. So I think it was a little bit odd for them to be surrounded by these worshipful boomer Latinos, Chicanos, who wanted something from them, who wanted for them to embody something or other, or represent the voice of the martyred demigod, and it was awkward, very awkward.
Well, I mean, thankfully
they were great, and they were gracious, and I'm appreciative, and they offered a great deal of support and help. Although it was painful sometimes for them to dig back into a terrible moment. You imagine you're a child and you get the news and that daddy's head's been blown off and he's never going to come back. I mean, that's not, not all of us have to endure that. And so I have much respect and compassion for them, and much gratitude for the assistance they provided.
I do have to go back into the horrible part of his story, was his death. In the beginning of your film, you had a lot of sound bites from people in the community and conspiracy theorists, or whatever you call it. Do you think that the film satisfied the conspiracy theories?
I don't. I'm just a maker. I'm not in charge of reception, and I wasn't there to satisfy conspiracy theories. That wasn't my intention either. By no stretch of the imagination.
Well, I think it was very gracefully, you were very graceful about talking to the people who were able to rationalize what took place and kind of knock the conspiracy theories out and said, this is what happened. It wasn't intentional. They weren't aiming at Ruben. How could the person behind the curtain know what was on the other side?
The weapon that's not designed for accuracy, with a whole variety of factors, in a very bright sunlight, smoky, very dark bar. The odds, as a matter of fact, the bartender, who we didn't interview for and didn't include in the film, a Chicano guy who was very sympathetic to Ruben, and he said he was a marksman himself, a gun aficionado, and illustrated to me the absolute difficulty of someone in such bright circumstances who had never operated this weapon before to shoot in. And he said it was a sapo, as we say in billiards. It was a lucky shot. It's just, certainly vulgar and stupid and ill-advised and probably criminal thing to do, but he wasn't clever enough to do it on purpose.
So let's talk about that deputy for a bit. His name is Tom Wilson, former deputy with the Sheriff's Department.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the first time he actually used that kind of weapon?
Yes.
And you interviewed him, and I'm wondering, when you approached him, or whoever on your team approached him, what was his reaction before he agreed to do it?
It was, sometimes, like you're in journalism, as you know, one has to seduce people into things and convince them that maybe it's their interest, or that, everyone wants to tell their story, even an inglorious story. And before they go to kind of explain themselves, the best they can, all of us. Priests made a living on that in confession. Therapists do today.
Yeah.
People that go on, the talk shows and spill their guts out about their intimate things. People that show their meals and their glories, their consumption habits on Instagram and TikTok, or wiggle their ass. Everybody wants to be seen, and you just kind of try to appeal to that very reasonable, very human instinct, proclivity people have. And he was generous to sit down with us. That hadn't been done. Nobody found him. He was kind of like Darth Vader in Chicano lore, right? This guy that nobody had ever found him. And it wasn't that hard, really. It's not that hard to find anybody if you're really intent.
Well, I imagine you spoke to him at length before turning the camera on. What was his excuse?
I mean, it's in the film.
Was he ordered to shoot the projectile in there? Or did he take it upon?
It's in the film. It's in the film. So I mean, it's in the film. It's chaos, chaotic moment. There's a factory across the street on fire. there are people looting and running, and there's a situation of panic. And according to him, he's a report there are men with the guns in a bar, and he wants to flush them out, and shoots into it to try to flush them out.
One thing I noticed, though, I mean, he's very poised in his answering your questions and spoke matter of fact, but I didn't sense any remorse expressed.
I don't know. That's up to you. I mean, you can sense that what you like to sense, and then somebody else who watches it might feel that he expressed remorse. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what remorse looks like and everybody's different.
Would you know if he ever spoke to the family?
No, he did not.
From your conversations with the family, did they accept the film and the conclusions that were drawn?
You'd have to ask them.
Did you talk to them after the film?
I did.
And what'd they say?
I don't remember. I mean, it was, we've had very nice relationships since, and
Imagine it took you a number of years to get this done from the beginning to the end.
Yes, that's true. It was quite an ordeal. Again, to dig out a piece of story that had been left to innuendo, mythology, rumor, whispers, everything but reality, everything but real hard work. It was a bit of work, but really pleasure to do such work, really a privilege to do such work.
Well, I was glad to see that you were able to get the original news clips of that day from the police cars driving everywhere and the fires and aerials. I mean, all of that kind of they put you there for those of us who were not there. So I want to commend you for that. And one of my colleagues on the board asked if, since your film has come out, do you have any idea of any other evidence that has surfaced?
No. There's plenty of evidence in the boxes that we with the family donated to USC, those homicide files. Forgot there were 8 boxes or something. All these images, it's all there. Radio calls, sheriff radio calls. There's lots of data, and if someone's really intent, really someone is a very serious person, certainly I'd go through that first. But as far as I know, no. Every couple of years I get someone who reaches out and said they want to write a book and they want to do something and they want to figure out the real story. And I say, you go right ahead and give them all the leads I can give them and go at it.
Well, someone at the first panel that we had said they were really fascinated by the story, and that in today's world, they could easily see this being a miniseries that you would see on documentary Netflix channel or something like that. But this was a day and time when streaming miniseries didn't exist. So there still is so much interest in what happened back then. And, it's unfortunate that we had this figure and the legacy that he's left behind is bigger than life. And we got so many people who got into the business because they saw him and he represented that we could do this as journalists, cover stories and investigative reporting and what have you. And it's a huge loss. It is also a huge shame in the way that he passed. It was like you said, this guy's outside. He doesn't know who's inside. He doesn't aim at somebody's head. He just shoots his thing in there and poof, it's gone. Sorry, you probably hear my talks. The mailman's here. Is there anything else you would like to add about the making of this film and what you learned about it?
I mean, there's lots of things to talk about, obviously. I mean, the thing that interests me the most is moral courage, is the tenor of those times. It was the willingness of journalists of that era to really, a man who had been a soldier, who had been a foreign correspondent abroad, who had seen all kinds of horror, had seen all kinds of abuses of power, who had been a police reporter in El Paso, Texas, as a young reporter, and who had, with all that, kind of decided to be a gadfly, to be and to provoke and insist on answers from power, from very bellicose and unrelenting kind of power of that era. And I'm always impressed. And when I compare it to much of the journalism we've seen in the era since, And how did we get from a moment like 68 to a moment like this? And how much debility and underperformance and timidity and cowardice has kind of pervaded the ranks of journalism for something that was on the defensive: capitalism, arguably white supremacy, patriarchy. Those forces got even stronger after 68 and 70 and that era. And it astonishes me now how little leverage the left has, how little leverage non-white groups have, and women, vis-a-vis the hegemon. And so what happened to journalism? What happened to with that profession? How did priorities change? How did a country of educated people become such cows, become cowed by power? That question just boggles my mind, and it's important. And certainly the brutality of Rubin's demise, and JFK's demise, and et al. Was part of that. And certainly it struck fear into the hearts of activists. The notion that I think lots of young Chicanos said, hey, if they can kill this dude who's privileged, who's on top of the game here, they can certainly erase me. So I think the great regrettable part of the Salazar incident is the aftermath, in which I think it took a lot of steam out of the whatever it's called, steam or wind, out of off the momentum of revolutionary movements, and it made people who might be dissenting cower just a little bit more. And so that's what impresses me about Ruben. I think about, wow, would I do that? Would you do that? Would people are, there's a lot of entertainment reporters and a lot of taco reporters. Where's the investigative reporters that are going after the tough shit?
Well, we know one of our panelists, one of the people who's behind helping put this together is spectacular investigative journalist. That's Robert Lopez, and he's back in the game. So it is out there still. But the world has changed in many, many, many ways. And we're all stuck in this pandemic world, and which is why Zoom has become so popular. I'm just trying to think if there's you realize that CCNMA.
I know CCNMA for a long time, and
journalists.
I've participated. I knew Julio Moran very well, and I know Frank Sotomayor well, and I know some of those founding members, and have much respect for it, which is why I'm here. Very happy to be part of this and the awards and supporting a new generation of journalists that I'm hoping will add great value to our culture and to represent and genuinely embody the spirit of Salazar,
right.
And exhibiting that kind of intensity, professionalism, and passion. Well,
the founders of CCNMA created CCNMA because of him, and we are celebrating our 50th year next year, and we have events and things leading up to the anniversary date, which is actually in August.
Yes, I know. August 29th.
Yes. So our hope is to kind of continue to promote diversity in newsrooms around the country. And it's not just, one platform. It's not just print, it's TV, radio, online, whatever, platforms that journalism exists. And I think that we've grown in terms of our population in journalism tremendously. Unfortunately, we still don't see parity in some organizations. Certainly in upper management.
That's putting it mildly. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. We're not represented by large percentages in upper management, and that's a problem. But thankfully, we are very, very indebted to the story of Ruben Salazar, and that kind of keeps our focus. And I thank you so much for putting that together. I know it's tremendous effort.
Absolute privilege to do this kind of work. It's an absolute privilege. My grandparents were fruit pickers, man. I mean, I get to make documentaries about things I care about. Fuck, that's just that's a win.
Right. Well, I know there was a lot of work that went into what you did.
Works fine. Works fine if you're not wasting time on somebody's bullshit.
Right.
Works fine if you're not serving the master. works fine if you're doing the work of your own folks and your own self. And works great. It's a real blessing.
Having the TV background I know that there was a lot of work that went into that. But when you're having fun and you're enjoying it and you have a purpose and a bigger mission, it all comes together.
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk about anything else regarding this topic?
No. If there are any questions, I'll happy to field them.
Well, this is also going to be recorded, so people will be able to
Okay.
watch this at another, time that, so.
No, I think that I have nothing else to add. See the movie. It's on Vimeo. Ruben Salazar, Man in the Middle, is well worth seeing. And I hope you all enjoy it.
And on YouTube, that's how I got
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you so much, Philip.
Appreciate
Enjoy
it.
the rest of your day.
You have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.